I was 20 years old when I enlisted in the Marine Corps. The guys in my training platoon started as young as 16. I was one of the oldest ones. The reason why so many guys at that time were willing to enlist is because our fathers had fought in World War II. Now our country was in another war, and it was my generation's turn to step up and serve. So there wasn't a problem with that. We were pretty much willing to go, and go we did. Once we completed training, we were pretty much shipped over to Vietnam right away. When I got in country, I was dropped off in the bush. I met the company I was assigned to, and these guys were rushing on the helicopter with stretchers. One of the guys on those stretchers was the guy I was replacing. As it turns out, we went on this operation to get to Khe Sanh. It had been surrounded by the North Vietnamese forces. We opened it up, and then we stayed there. We took over, and those guys left. We stayed at Khe Sanh for like 3 months. This picture here is napalm being dropped in the mountains around us. This was our entertainment. It was like a big show every day. These 3 guys turned out to be my best friends. They were in my fire team. Fire team should be 4 guys. We only had 3 because we were always short. One guy was from the Boston area. The other guy was from the state of Washington. Both of these guys got wounded after I did. We all made it through a year, but what happens is your luck runs out. When you get to be short, you know you're pretty close to either making it unscratched or you ain't going to make it at all. We got lucky. All 3 of us made it. But like I said, all 3 of us got hit. And all 3 of us got hit right toward the end of our tour. This picture was taken at Khe Sanh. It was a mountainous area and the jungle surrounded us. Everything there was flattened. It was flattened because of artillery and being attacked. We got hit every single day. We lived in bunkers down below the ground level, and we lived in trenches. When things eased up, you got out of the trenches because they were full of rats. This picture was taken along the coast. We're just below the DMZ. And as you can see, it's the rainy season. You were just wet. When it rained, you were wet. The things in the background were your poncho liners that you put over your fighting holes to try to keep the water out when it rained. But it didn't matter. You were just always wet. We never took showers. We never took baths. This was us. We just had a saying, it's home is where you dig it, literally every night. In this picture, I wasn't wounded. What had happened is I was in a truck and we were being transferred to another place. We were getting mortared and the truck swerved to avoid a crater, and the side broke and out I went. I dislocated my shoulder. It was a good thing. I got to be at a hospital. I got to sleep in a bed for the first time in 3 months, and I got to eat good food. Can't argue about that. No Purple Heart because I wasn't wounded. I just got hurt. People get hurt a lot in war. When I got back to the company, I got lucky because I had a year of college. They made me the company mail orderly. This job lasted for about maybe 2 months. And it was real nice because I didn't have to go out in the bush. I just stayed in the back with the gear and made sure everybody got their mail. What a life. It was really a good time. But all good things must come to an end, so back out to the bush I went. And when I got to the bush, things weren't so bad. We ran, you do everything. This picture here was taken when I was still at the company mail orderly. These were the company clerks, and this was Christmas. We did a tree the best we could. Somebody had one sent over, and somebody else's parents sent lights, and we had Christmas. It was about as good as it got. As you can see, wintertime over there is still, you're still sweating your hiney off. And that never changed. It was always hot over there, always. This day, we were running a patrol, and it was my turn to carry the radio. We took turns because you were a big target. That radio was a nice target. They wanted to kill you so that if firefight started, you couldn't call in air support, you couldn't call in medevacs because the radio guy was dead. So it was a real risk to carry the radio, and that's why we passed it around. Everybody got to share in the risks. The area that we were patrolling there was pretty flat. Once in a while, we got to go on a tank. And you don't really understand how big these things are until you see how many people could ride on one of these things. One day we were riding on one of these things and it hit a mine. Everybody got blown off. The tank got lifted off the ground. Didn't hurt the tank, didn't hurt us. We all climbed back on it. Off we went. Those things are really monsters. In the next picture that you're going to see, these things are called ontoses. They could hold about 14 guys inside. They could go right from the land into the water and just keep churning along. We had to stop here for some reason. We're out of patrol and we had to stop. I forgot the reason why. I guess one of them broke down. But it was a good chance for everybody to take a break, relax, catch up on writing a letter home, maybe even eat a meal. All of our meals were in boxes called sea rations. And one day I looked at the box that I was eating out of, and it was packaged the same year that I was born. That box was over 20 years old, and I was eating the food. Things weren't all that good. Now in this picture, it's back at base camp. We were having a football game. It was, I think this was around, maybe Thanksgiving. I don't know. But at any rate, we did get, whenever we could, we had fun. We made our own fun. This was clean fun. Some of the fun we did out in the bush is when we would find unexploded rounds. And one of our jobs was to carry explosives with us, blow these things up so that the enemy couldn't get them and booby trap them. What we would do for fun is to short fuse them. That means see how short a fuse we could put on it, how far we could get before the thing blew up. One day, we short fused it so much that we all got about 3 steps away and the thing blew up. Every one of us went flying in the air. Fortunately, nobody got hurt. And when we could hear again, because every one of us, all we could see is everybody moving their mouth. Nobody could hear. The explosion was so loud. But we decided, maybe we had to cut that out. It wasn't too safe. In this picture, we're inside one of those tents that you saw in the background. This is as good as it got in there. And what we're doing is we're going over the plans for an ambush that night. We would share these things, these tents. When we were out, somebody else would move in. This is another picture of us on patrol. We're not carrying anything on our backpacks. Sometimes when we went out on operations, we had over 100 pounds on our back. Here, we're just on a patrol, so all we got is our canteens and our ammo. And you would run a patrol. The patrol would last maybe 3 or 4 hours, and you were back. Now, in the next picture, let me see what's coming up. Here we are. We're supposed to be on a patrol. We learned pretty quick that the officers had no idea what was going on. So sometimes when we were sent out on patrol, we'd hurry along a little bit so we could get someplace where we wanted to be. In this one, we got to this one place in the village, and we sat down and we had our card game. We were just killing time before we had to turn around and go back in. The little kids were always good. It was good to have the little kids around because when the little kids were around, you knew it was safe. When the little kids weren't around, you knew the enemy was around. In this one, we're taking a break during the patrol. We found this, it's kind of like a cave. And here you do whatever you wanted to. When we took a break, this one guy is asleep. Sometimes you'd write a letter, and like I said, if you had any extra food, you ate. You took a chance to eat. You took a chance to sleep whenever you got it, because at night, the most sleep you ever got in any one given night, continuous sleep, was 3 hours, because you always had to stand watch. In this picture, we're on a patrol, and we got the word that the enemy was moving toward us. So we stopped. I said, all right, quick, take my picture before we go into this firefight. And we were expecting it, but they never showed up. I guess they must have figured, why mess with us? And I guess they took a left or a right. But they never showed up. But we were ready. You were always ready for a fight. You had to be. Otherwise, you were dead. You stayed on your toes. Here we are moving through one of the villages. This village was not one of the most prosperous villages, but this is pretty much what their houses look like. Most of them were just dirt floors, and they were made out of whatever material the people could get out of the jungle. They didn't have much. These people just didn't have much. And it was always getting blown to bits because these people were in the middle of the war. You felt sorry for them, but at the same time, you couldn't feel too sorry for them because some of them were the enemy. During the day, they would just turn into farmers. This is a little temple that they set up. This was one of their holidays that were coming up. And as you can see, they made use of whatever they had. That's a Budweiser can in the middle that holds the incense sticks that they burned. We had to search everything because there wasn't anything that they wouldn't use to hide weapons. So we always angered the villagers because they wanted to be left alone, but we couldn't do it. Here you see this one woman, her teeth are all black. The reason why is because the women chewed what was called betel nut. It gave them a high, but it also ruined their teeth. The young girls weren't allowed to chew betel nut until after they got married. Then they didn't care what their teeth looked like. It was really amazing. The kids were beautiful. The young girls were beautiful. But hard work out in the fields took its toll. I don't think these women are much more than 30 years old. Here you see the little kids. You don't see any diapers. They didn't have diapers. They were lucky to have any clothing whatsoever. And you'll notice that if you see a picture coming up with little kids, sometimes the little kids are smoking. They smoked. They didn't, that was just, you wouldn't think that anybody would smoke until they were at least into their late teens. These kids were smoking cigarettes as young as 9 years old. And that's just the way their life was for these guys. It was totally different. I took this picture because it was really interesting to see what these people used and how they made use of everything. What they're doing here, these are the rice paddies. They're getting them ready. And they're irrigating the rice paddy. They had this bag on these two ropes, and they would swing it, catch water, and dump it on the other side. Swing it back, catch water, and dump it on the other side. And they would do this until they had enough water. Didn't matter if it took 2-3 hours. This is what they had to do. And these people were hard working. And I don't blame them for not being happy with us. We'd go through and wreck their rice paddies, and then they'd have to work days to get them back. In this picture, this little kid here, he was in charge of the black market. This little kid could get you anything you wanted. You wanted an ice cold Coke? Within 30 minutes, for $1, you had a cold soda. I don't know where he got it. I don't know how he got it. But this kid was good. I protected this kid. I became real good friends with this kid. And he and I got along great. You're going to see him coming up later in another picture. Here we are in the village with the little kids and one of their old men. They love this all right, but they're all making this sign. And this sign means screw you. Because, we're always messing them. You go through their village, you got to tear it apart looking for weapons. And you went into their bunkers, sometimes you had to blow them up, and then they had to build a bunker because when the artillery came in at night, they needed that bunker so they could stay alive. Like I said, they really didn't like us that much. Here's that little kid again who was in charge of the black market. What did I care? I trusted this kid. That's my rifle with a full magazine in there, and I gave it to the little kid to take his picture. You see my bayonet in the back? I wasn't afraid of this kid, and this kid wasn't afraid of me. We got along great. I saved him one day. And ever since, he and I were tight. Unfortunately, I couldn't stay around here too long. We got moved out. But this kid was so good that he would tell me. He'd ask me where we're going on patrol. I would tell him. He'd say, it's a good day. And if he knew that they were out there, he'd say, don't go. So I saved this kid saved me. Here the women in the village are separating some of the stuff that they've taken out of their garden. They grew all kinds of stuff, and a lot of their food, I had no idea what it was. But to them, that's, farming was their way of life, and that's how they stayed alive. In this picture, we were at a camp. It was very small, and we were with the Arvins. The Arvin was the Army of South Vietnam, and those guys were the worst troops ever. You didn't trust them, because who knew who was going to shoot you in the back? Who knew, who was really there to fight a war? So you didn't trust them. You pretty much stayed out of their way, and they stayed out of ours. Here's another picture with the little kid. This little kid wants my cigarette. Because like I said, all the little kids smoked. But it was good, like I told you before, to have these kids around because you knew that the enemy wasn't around. When you went into a village on patrol and there were no little kids, you had to be on your toes because you knew that the enemy was around. And the reason why the little kids weren't there is because their parents hid them. The parents knew what was going on. You couldn't trust any of these people. In this picture, this is one of the guys. This picture is the guys who were in my squad. You had a fire team, and then there were 4 fire teams that made up a squad. Everybody in this picture got hit within a week after I got hit. So your odds of making it through were not good. If you were in the ground, and that's what we were ground pounders, we were called grunts, bush rats, your odds of making it through your tour of duty unscratched weren't good. This is my friend Beaky. Beaky lived in Boston. Beaky was going home. Beaky made it. He never got wounded, never got scratched up, and he was going home. And you can see Beaky had an attitude. Beaky was going home. I think he was going to end up being a hippie. All of us were pretty much anti-war by the time it was over because we knew that this war was pretty much pointless. The only reason we kept fighting is to keep each other alive. Here you can see my attitude. I'm getting short in this picture. I haven't been wounded, and I was getting scared. I knew my time was coming. When you started to get short, people wouldn't even walk next to you because your luck had run out. Hardly anybody made it home without getting wounded. So everybody knew my luck was running out. And I was just waiting. I was almost out of there. And then I got it. But you know what? Even when I got it, I was lucky. When I got wounded, I started to cry because I thought I was going to die. And then I was laying there and I said to myself, pull yourself together. You can't let yourself go. There's too many parties to go to, too many girls, and too much beer to drink. You cannot let yourself go. And when they put me on a helicopter, the pilot, the gunner, he knew I was trying to say something. And he couldn't hear me because of the noise of the helicopter. So he took his helmet off and he leaned down. He says, what? Because he thought I was complaining about, my pain. And I said to him, I'm going home. I had 31 days left in country after being there for a year when I got hit. This is a picture of me in the hospital. It's one of the generals. They'd come around and they'd try to be, good for your morale. I was in this field hospital and I woke up. And the chaplain was there at the foot of the bed. And he looks at me, he said, you just tied a record. And I said, what do you mean tied a record? He says, for the most tubes coming in and out of your body. Well, I guess I had 7 of them. Taking blood in and out, and I had a chest tube, and I had a couple of drains in. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, you tied the record for the most tubes coming in and out. And You lost your leg. I said, I didn't lose my leg. It's still there. So you know what? I got everything. I guess I set the record. This article is when I finally got back to the States, and I still needed to be in the hospital to recoup. I spent 4 months in the hospital before I could actually walk again and use most of my hands and my arms. But even so, I walked with a limp for about 3 years. It took about 3 years before I could actually walk well. Here's when I finally got home. And my parents had made this little sign for me. They weren't sure exactly when I was coming home, but I surprised them, and I showed up one day. I didn't even tell them that I was coming. They just knew that I was coming. I had made it. I had made it through alive, and I was one of the lucky ones, because there were sure a lot of guys who didn't make it through alive.